You're in tune with Radio 2 on 433 and 330 meters, frequencies of 693 and 909 kilohertz.
And now, as 1979 finally comes to a close, the News Huddlines takes a long look at the last 10 years. With Janet Brown, Chris Emmett, the Nick Rowley Quintet, and of course the man who's given his name to the show, Roy Huddlines.
Thank you very much indeed, folks, and welcome to the show. Yes, the show that does for politicians what the guillotine did for sore throats. And if you don't already know it, this show is a special live end-of-the-decade edition. Of course, we've got the usual warnings from the hierarchy, no libelous slander and no bad taste. So good night, folks, and thank you for listening. And most important of all, they told us not to use foul language, which was disappointing, really, because it meant we had to drop the Duke of Edinburgh sketch, but there you are. And so, on with the jokes, which reminds me. Don't worry about that. We promised to wake up Bob Monkhouse so he can listen to his next cabaret act, you know. Pencil ready, Bobby baby? Right, then. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the 70s. Yes, the 70s. Well, the 70s can be described in just two well-chosen words, and the second one is lousy. It was 10 years dominated by strikes, violence, poverty, and inflation, and that was only the good news. In 10 years, we had 3 prime ministers and Jim Callaghan. And the new decade dawned, those 70s dawned, with Harold Wilson at that...
Watch it, Sunbeam, watch it.
With Harold Wilson at the helm, assuring us that the 70s would be a very prosperous decade for the country. What he didn't tell us was that the country he was talking about was Japan. Now, January 1970, the death penalty was abolished and replaced by something even worse, visits from Lord Longford. Meanwhile, Harold Wilson was visiting America, where he spent a week with President Nixon on a refresher course.
Are you insinuating that I took lessons from Richard Nixon?
Well, of course not, Sir Harold.
Because if you are, I want to categorically deny it. It was me who gave lessons to him.
Well, June of that year saw a run-up to a general election with the Labour Manifesto entitled Hello to a Stronger Britain. The Conservatives, hello to a better tomorrow, and the Liberals all together now, hello sailor. Yes, the election came on June the 18th, with the Tories getting 330 seats, Labour getting 287 seats, and the Liberals getting a little stall in the corner. That line's best not pried into, but there we go. Now, and Ted Heath became Britain's first bachelor prime minister, and straight away he made his first mistake.
Good evening.
Yeah. Yes, he appointed a little-known grocer's daughter from Grantham as Secretary of State for Education, Mrs. Thatcher, a lady whose very breath could solidify mercury. But we weren't the only country holding elections in 1970. No, believe it or not, they were holding one in Russia with 2 candidates. Brezhnev or Siberia. Meanwhile, the royal family were on an 18-day cultural tour of Australia and New Zealand. The highlight being the 17 and a half days they spent in New Zealand. Don't throw those tin bats at me. There we are. And then came the national dock strike. And you could tell dockers' wives were having to buy food. And... By golly. Sure, Jan Leeming. There we are. That was in the 70s as well. Do you remember that film called Women in Love, eh? Oliver Reed and Alan Bates were the first men to appear completely nude on the screen. You remember it, all right? Yes, the film had the distinction of being both a runaway success and a huge flop at the same time. It's more of a visual, really. Chris, stop doing it. 1971 was upon us, and Idi Amin came to power in Uganda. Hello there. Straight away, he showed his true colours by trying to annex Poland. But the British government did introduce something that year, a sensible decision which caused the people to dance with frenzied delight. Street parties were held in celebration, and at a stroke, Believe me, life was made happier, cheaper, and much more tolerable. That's right, they introduced decimal currency. Oh, I see, yes. On February the 14th, 1971, there were 12 old pennies in a shilling. 6 months later, there were 12 old pennies in a pound. Yes, I think so. That's it, waving their pension book. Stop that down there now. And that's only the writers. Now... You remember all that decimal business? They bombarded us for months, didn't they, with leaflets and conversion tables. Most people still didn't have a clue about the new money, apart from a few unscrupulous shopkeepers, of course, who were waiting to take advantage of the situation.
Morning, Mr. Hudson.
Good morning, Mrs. Stevens. I'll be with you in a moment. There you are, Mr. Atkinson. 1 packet of wine gums, 15.5 new p.
I don't understand it. Yesterday there were only tuppence in old money.
This is decimal day, Mr. Atkinson. You're forgetting to divide everything by 2.4, aren't you?
2.4. What's that in English figures?
Just over 2 and a bit, isn't it? Now, here's your change. 10, 20, 17.5, 13 and 9 makes 63.5.
Is that right?
Of course it is. You gave me 86.5, didn't you?
Oh, it's times like this when I seriously consider giving up wine gums. 2.4 divide by...
Time you went back to school, Mr. Atkinson.
Oh, you're right. I got the boys for maths at 10 o'clock.
What can I do for you, Mrs. Stevens? Mrs. Stevens?
Oh, sorry. I was just admiring your new till.
Yes, I converted it myself to take decimal currency. It's amazing what you can do with a couple of nails and a tea chest. Now, what can I do for you, my dear?
This jar of coffee, what's this? 90p.
90p, yes, that's the deposit. Then it's 6 months at 45p.
Never mind. What's your tins of corned beef?
Corned beef, 87.5.
It was only £0.50 yesterday.
Well, no, it's the new decimal price, Mrs. Stevens. You see, I've rounded up all the corned beef.
I only want 1 tin, not the old bloody herd.
You don't understand. You haven't been studying your decimal conversion tables, have you?
No.
Good.
Here, how much are your mixed biscuits?
47 new p.
£1.
All right, then give me £1 and don't say I never treat you.
Right, hold it right there. I've seen enough.
What? Who the heck are you?
I'm from the Trading Standards Board, and I'm arresting you for blatant, unfair trading. This'll cost you, £1,000 at least.
£1,000? Come off it, mate. I know the law, and the maximum fine is £50. I know...
That was yesterday. You're forgetting to divide by 2.4. Then you multiply by...
Right, well, in January 1972, MPs awarded themselves a massive 38% pay rise, which brought them into line with Lou Grade. And... yes, that was the year the BBC celebrated 50 years of radio broadcasting. Amazing, isn't it? Especially when you consider the technological advancement in the quality of sound output. For instance, listen to the tonal quality of this modern 1970s broadcast.
Morning, all. Welcome to the JY Prog. This is JY himself.
Now, compare that with the sound quality of this program, originally transmitted in 1922.
Morning, all. Welcome to the
Only the shackle is changed, ladies and gentlemen. Now. And finally, in 1972, Bruce and Anthea announced their love. Anthea's love for Bruce and Bruce's love for Bruce. And a hit film of the year was Fiddler on the Roof, which told the story of John Paulson and his TV aerial business. Now, on January the 1st, 1973, the government took Great Britain into the common market. Yes, what an excuse just to get rid of Roy Jenkins, eh? 9 countries working together in unison to achieve one specific goal, to sell cheap butter to Russia. 7 years in the common market. And what have we got to show for it, eh? Metrification and the Charles Aznavour show. I don't know. Well, that's our opinion, but what about the ordinary person in the street? In Piccadilly, for instance. Excuse me?
Yeah?
What's your views on the fact we've now been in Europe for the past 7 years?
I think it's about time we scored a bleeding goal, mate.
Oh, I see. And a final word on the subject. Experts have predicted that were the people of this country asked to vote in another referendum on the common market, the result would be a resounding... Well, in February... Oh, yes, if you like. Well, in February, there were one-day stoppages on British Rail because of inter-union dispute over whose job it was to dip the tea bag. And... There's plenty for everybody in this script, folks, believe me. And in April, purchase tax was abolished and replaced by something called VAT, eh? The scourge of the small businessman, who now had more paperwork to do than a dying man applying for a hospital bed. Yes. And in July, the government passed an act which banned pyramid selling. Damn shame for you Egyptian estate agents, but there you are. And they passed another act which protected historic wrecks. Good news for Barbara Cartland. Then... Oh, she's in. I'm terribly sorry, Bob. Then came another Arab-Israeli conflict, the fourth one since the Six-Day War. Do you remember the Six-Day War, eh? That was the one where the Israelis refused to fight on Saturdays. Didn't mean it, Moisha. Oh, I'm sorry. You're eating a banana. My mistake. There we are. Meanwhile, the American experimental Skylab went into orbit with 3 astronauts and 2 flies. Which made the third astronaut's eyes bulge, I can tell you. On the 14th of November, though, Princess Anne married Mark Phillips.
Anne, do you take this man to be your lawful wedded husband?
I do.
Mark, do you take this woman to be your lawful wedded wife?
He does.
Yes, it was a magnificent royal occasion. And the wedding came at just the right time for Princess Anne because our other hamster had just died. Do you remember the Watergate Scandal? Looking back now, I mean, it makes you think, doesn't it, eh? The lengths a man will go to just to get on the David Frost show, I ask.
The cops have caught some burglars in downtown Watergate. Though why they were installing bugs, it's hard to speculate. But don't disturb the president. He's got affairs of state to keep his mind upon.
Glory, glory, Bernard Barker. Glory, glory, Frank Sturgis. Glory, glory, Richard Nixon. His truth goes marching on.
They found illegal tape recordings Richard Nixon took with unexplained erasures, though he says he's not a crook. They say they will impeach him, and he says he'll write a book. That's how he'll earn his bread.
Glory, glory, John C. Riker. Glory, glory, Sam J. Irvin. Glory, glory on the White House. Let's hope his truth is dead.
Well, that same year in show business, Marlon Brando got $2 million for his small part in Last Tango in Paris. There's no need to do the rest. They're making up their own jokes here, folks. Then came the 3-day week. And the funny thing about the reduced working week, though, was that people produced as much in 3 days as they'd previously been doing in 5, which led to some workers not affected by the strikes wanting to do their own week's work in only 3 days as well. Mr. Grimsby?
It's you, Vicar.
Yes, it is. Now, about the arrangement we came to whereby I agreed to let you do your grave-digging duties in 3 days, provided you did as much work. Now, a few of my parishioners have complained.
Why's that then, Vicar?
Well, for one thing, they take exception to your parading the streets with a wheelbarrow, shouting, "Bring out your dead." And everybody was most upset at Mr. Harmon's funeral the other day. His wife was crying her eyes out.
Oh, that was because you performed such a moving ceremony.
It was because you started filling the grave in before I'd finished, Mr. Grimsby.
Yeah, well, I was a bit pushed for time, you see, Vicar. I mean, I had another grave to dig.
Yes, that would be Mr. Willoughby's grave, I assume.
Yeah, the late Mr. Willoughby. Laid to rest yesterday, God rest his soul. Mrs. Willoughby took it very badly, I believe.
It's hardly surprising, is it?
What do you mean?
Well, he wasn't dead, was he?
Well, no. He wouldn't have lasted a week out, though. I mean, he was very poorly. Very, very low, you know.
Yes, not as low as he is now, though, was he?
Yeah. Well, like I say, I mean...
Yes, and Mr. Hargreaves wasn't dead either, was he, Mr. Grimsby?
Mr. Hargreaves? What makes you think that?
The way he kept trying to force the lid off the coffin, that's right.
Oh, Harry Hargreaves.
Harry Hargreaves, yes.
Oh, sorry about that, Vicar. You see, I got him mixed up with Bert Hargreaves.
Bert.
Now, Bert Hargreaves was dead. He was dead.
Only because you'd shot him.
I never shot him.
Yes, you did, Mr. Grimsby, didn't you?
Only a bit.
Yeah. I thought so, which is why I informed the police. By the way, where is that constable I sent along to question you a few minutes ago?
Gone.
Gone?
But not forgotten.
You mean you... Now, look here, Grimsby, this has got to stop. Do you hear? You can leave that grave and report for duty tomorrow morning as usual. Now, I said you can leave that grave and... Grimsby? Grimsby, what are you doing? Grimsby, you won't get away with this, you know.
Dearly beloved.
Well, the 1st of January 1974 was declared an official bank holiday, which was good news for the half dozen or so who used to turn up for work. And February opened with Prime Minister Ted Heath calling a general election to decide once and for all who ran the country. Well, he was as curious as the rest of us. The Labour Party won the election, and Dennis Healey was made Chancellor. And in his very first budget, he proved that he was a mathematical wizard by putting income tax up by 3 fingers and a toe, cigarettes up by 2 toes and a thumb, and spirits up by a total of 21. That's 10 fingers, 10 toes, and what else was happening in 1974? Oh, yeah, that was also... Stop doing that, Chris. 74 was also the year when meat tokens for pensioners were introduced. But it didn't work. I mean, who's going to swap their granny for a meat token, eh? However, history was made in February 1975 when Mrs. Margaret Thatcher succeeded Ted Heath as the leader of the Tories. She was now the most influential woman in the Tory party since Mandy Rice Davis. Yes. Oh, yes, yes. Who will ever forget the day that Maggie Thatcher, the thinking man's Rita Webb, took over the Tory helm? Ah, how well we recall her victory speech to the Tory faithful.
All right, Dennis, that's enough. You know I prefer to blow my own. Good evening to you all, my most beloved subjects. No, please don't get up. Just kneel back and relax. Well, here I stand on the threshold of greatness because you, the Conservative Party, have chosen me, and may I say, in all honesty and sincerity, from the bottom of my heart, about bleeding time. Now, let me begin my first edict by stating here and now, I will not, I repeat, not tolerate taking it easy, as I said to Dennis only last night. I intend leading this party in a new dynamic style, which is why I am talking to you like this tonight and why I am sitting on this 10-foot throne. There will be changes. I intend surrounding myself with the sort of people I like working with. In other words, non-entities. My main advisor will be Sir Keith Joseph. Now let me scotch once and for all those ridiculous slanders that Sir Keith is mentally unstable. I had hoped he would be here in person to refute these rumors, but unfortunately he says he's too busy preparing for Waterloo. Tonight, I would like to outline briefly the policies I want this party to pursue. Firstly, the common market. Now, we really must not be insular. We must remember that the EEC does not just include Britain. The EEC also incorporates wogs, frogs, krauts, sprouts, licks, spicks, and dagos. We can't forget this, worse luck. My other main plank of policy will be law and order, where I am in favor of short, sharp sentences, such as hang 'em and shoot the lot. But, you know, I would like tonight to pay my own tribute to the man I defeated in the election for the leadership, Ted Heath. And I have composed this little verse in Ted's praise. All hail to our Ted Heath, what services he rendered. Let these words be his epitaph, gone but not remembered. Before I dismiss you all, may I remind you, the Tory party, that a great task lies ahead of us. A task we must tackle with patience, calm, and moderation. So, in the immortal words of that political moderate who has influenced me the most, Boadicea, I say, charge!
Meanwhile, the economy was getting worse, and Prime Minister Harold Wilson...
No, I did not.
Didn't what?
Whatever it was you're going to say.
Yes, Harold Wilson went to Moscow, Washington, and Ottawa. It's amazing where you end up when you fall asleep on a train, isn't it, really? And the GPO increased the price of a first-class stamp from 4.5p to 7p, and it was at that time that someone suggested it'd be a good idea if the post office were to deliver the morning milk. So, yes, so we could all have cheese in our tea. Worth thinking about. No, all right, never mind. Yes, prices went up and up and up. Now, in May, the government took over British Leyland, which is like investing in a fleet of Japanese warplanes, really, isn't it? Into Michael Edwards' scrapyard. There we are. Now, but think of it. Millions of pounds of taxpayers' money just to keep the RAC in business. It's not right, is it? Now, in June, we heard the first live radio broadcast from the House of Commons. But it's not the same without Tommy Hanley, is it, really? Now, in November, the government introduced a bill outlawing sex discrimination, which meant that from now on, there was no difference between men and women. Of course, certain aspects of it were ridiculous, weren't they? And still are. I mean, you can't ask a woman to do Rudolf Nuriev's job, can you? I mean, she's not going to wear it, is she? In December... First gag of the programme, there, never mind. In December, Dennis Healey came up with some seasonal good news when he decided to postpone the tax on wealth and possessions until he'd seen what he got for Christmas. But that great film, they had some big films that year in 1975, and the big one was the blockbuster Jaws, was so successful that he decided to make a sequel, which they called That's Life. Then... But the great film of that period was the train thriller, Murder on the Orient Express. And if you haven't seen it, I can tell you now, the sausage roll did it.
1976.
For no reason at all, folks, that was. Except he hasn't had a line for 4 pages, so it was fair. Well, the pantomime at Colchester's going like a bomb, folks. There we are. 1976 dawned, and straight away the spotlight fell onto one of the most advanced achievements the world had ever seen. No, not the generation game. Concorde. And in January 1976, the first supersonic passenger flight between Heathrow and Bahrain was brought into service. Of course, there were a few doubts whether it would be allowed to land in an Arab country. They thought it looked too Jewish, but with wings that go like that, you know what I mean? Oh, listeners, if you could see us now. Hair under the wings, there we are. But now... But now the service has extended, the Concorde service extended to all four corners of the earth. And these days, you can start your breakfast porridge on takeoff at Heathrow and shtoom, have your trousers cleaned in New York. Now, in March, Harold Wilson resigned as Prime Minister, but nobody believed him. He didn't believe it himself until Marcia told him, I tell you. Now, do you remember the infamous Wilson resignation honours list? And oddly enough, many of the people he honoured had a reunion this week in Wormwood Scrubs. But whether or not the dreaded Marcia was instrumental in making up the list has always remained in some doubt until now.
And to George Brown, a BBA. A barrel of brown ale. Come in, the drawbridge is down.
Hello, Harold.
Oh, it's you, Marcia. Come in, pull up a pillow.
Harold, it's about your resignation honours list, Harold. Have you finished it yet?
No, I haven't. Quite frankly, I'm stuck over what to award Mary. You see, I had thought of offering her the highest honour available to a woman. But then I remembered she was already married to me. I know. I'll give her the MBE for her services to poetry.
Her services to poetry?
Yes, she's given it up. Oh, well, that's it then. The complete list of people I intend to honour.
Yes, well, I'll just check it if you don't mind, Harold. After all, in the past, I've had to cross off a couple of names, haven't I?
The Cray brothers, you mean? Well, I still maintain they were innocent, you know.
Nevertheless, Harold, we can't take the risk of honouring anyone who might turn out to be an embarrassment to you in the future.
Which is the reason I've been particularly careful with my choices this year, Marcia. Take sport. The two people I've selected for OBEs are both men of the highest integrity who, if I'm any judge of character, will continue to put their country before personal greed.
Who are they?
Tony Gregg and Don Revy.
And who have you selected from the world of commerce?
Again, people who, in my expert opinion, are of unimpeachable character, display brilliant business acumen, and are solid as a rock. These people here, you see.
Who exactly are the Crown agents?
Very good lads, land speculators.
Do you think honouring land speculators is quite wise, Harold? I'm remembering your involvement in the slag heap affair.
I've never been anywhere near Joan Collins.
I better cross them off as well, then, and to save time, you read down the list to see if I approve of the rest of your choices.
Oh, very well. Here we go. Right, number 1, the Sex Pistols.
No.
Roman Polanski.
No.
Joyce McKinney.
No.
Colonel B.
No.
Ladbrokes. The Ayatollah Khomeini.
No.
Adolf Hitler, posthumous award.
No, Harold. Look, I think it would be better if I make up a list and then show it to you for your approval.
Very well, but Marcia, for all your sterling work over these past years, could I possibly give you one? A title, Marcia, a title I'm talking about.
Well, that's very kind, but I am already a lady. What more could I possibly have?
Hang on. Harold will fix it. Wait a minute. Just let me dial this. Here we go. There. Hello? Is that the Palace? Hello, Liz. You know you said you felt like a long break.
Well, of course, and looking back now, we realise that Wilson's resignation left a great void in the Labour Party. Jim Callaghan. Do you recall Jim's words on the day he became Prime Minister?
I want to say in all honesty and sincerity to the people of this country that the day this job stops being fun, then that's the day I shall resign.
Congratulations, Jim.
I resign?
Yes, Jim Callaghan, the farmer who was destined to become a farmer again. Meanwhile, the pound had sunk to its lowest level ever, and you could tell all the new pound notes had a picture of the Queen wearing an aqualung. Well, you slip a few of those in now and again, you know. And at that time, Thames Television had taken over a station in New York to show a week of typical English television. And they were all there, Columbo, Soap, the streets of San Francisco. And talking about mindless mediocrity reminds me that people keep inquiring about the band. People like the Police. Irate Parents and Nat Temple, but don't worry, folks. The Nick Rowley Quintet always crawl about the floor in between numbers in case anyone spilled some drink last night. Anyway, seeing it's Christmas, I've decided to let them out of their cage and play a piece which for them sums up the songs of the 70s. All together now. Now, that was called Save Your Kisses. If I were a summertime love ball wizard, she's the one. She's the one I'd like to tie a yellow ribbon round to Bangor. There go the Nick Rowley Quintet with their mouths in each other's ears, whispering grass. Now, 1977 was upon us, and that was the year Jimmy Carter was installed as President of the United States. At last, the American people had a leader who was incapable of graft, greed, and corruption. Well, let's face it, he's not clever enough, is he, really? But at least he was the one man who had the grim, terrifying weapon with which to terrorize the Russians, his family. And after Jimmy Carter's inauguration speech, do you remember this sound? Oh. That's right. His brother Billy giving an interview. Now, in February, David Owen became Britain's youngest foreign secretary since Anthony Eden. He was handsome, witty, sexy, debonair, glamorous, elegant, suave, and stupid. And 77 was the year, you remember, that Peter Jay was appointed Britain's ambassador to Washington.
Peter, I want you to know that I've given you this job not because you are my son-in-law or anything like that, but basically because of one of your outstanding personal qualities.
Father-in-law, I'm touched.
That's the one.
But things were happening abroad, and Solly Begin was... He was made Prime Minister of Israel, where he immediately took the usual security precautions. He put the country in his wife's name. Now, in Pakistan, they introduced a new penal code which included amputations for theft. In other words, if you were caught with your hand in the till, it stayed there. And China lifted their ban on Shakespeare and Beethoven, which came too late because they were already dead. And well, Janet liked it. There you are. You come on. And the Labour government had joined with the Liberals to form the Lib Lab Lobby, using an idea they got from the Flower Pot Men. I think so. Looks marvellous written down, but there we are, you know. But the outstanding occasion of 1977, and indeed perhaps the happiest event of the 70s, was, of course, the Queen's Silver Jubilee celebrations. But one thing cast a dark shadow over the celebrations was the threat that Idi Amin was going to attend in his capacity as self-styled King of Scotland.
Oh, yes, it's a broad brick moonlick nick to nick. We knew. Hello there, laddie.
Tell me, Your Supreme Excellency.
Stop your tickling joke. Hit me with my rhythm stick. Okay, let's go.
Tell me, Your Supreme Excellency.
You don't get this one with Mark Yarwood, do you?
Why did you appoint yourself King of Scotland?
Well, I was watching some of the Scottish soccer fans on the television behaving in a most thoroughly barbaric manner, vomiting over the old ladies and beating up the innocent bystanders. And I thought to myself, them's my kind of people. You see me, Jimmy?
Yes, not if we see you first, mate. There we are. Now, if the Jubilee was the happiest story of 1977, then the saddest must have been Victor the Giraffe. Do you remember him, eh? Yes, I know. He was trying to do what giraffes have got to try and do if they don't want to become extinct. But all of a sudden, his legs collapsed beneath him. I know just how he feels. And he just lay there, didn't he? Looking like the George Brown of the animal kingdom. And apparently his very last words were, "I've heard of coitus interruptus, but this is ridiculous." How about that, eh? A talking giraffe. There we are. But 1977 was also the year Reg Prentice went over to the Tories, who afforded him the treatment that a man of his integrity deserved. They ignored him. Jimmy Carter gave the go-ahead for the production of the neutron bomb. Now, that's the bomb that leaves buildings intact, but gets rid of people. Rather like a Dorothy Squires concert. But not quite as effective. There we are. In December, London Transport opened the new underground link to Heathrow Airport so that passengers could now arrive in plenty of time for their 7-hour delay. And on the sporting scene, there was Joe Bugner. You remember him, eh? Floats like an elephant, stings like a flea. You remember him? Yes, well, he gave up boxing to make films in Italy, but he couldn't do nude scenes, no, on account of his cauliflower back. And who remembers this sound from the year 1977? That's right, Joyce McKinney getting ready for bed. Yes, Joyce McKinney was reported to have said of her Mormon love slave, "I would ski naked down Everest with a carnation up my nose for him." Well, it says nose here, anyway. Oh, no, sorry, it's a misprint. There we are now. The girl who liked her boyfriends to take their clothes off and slip into something uncomfortable, eh? What a woman.
Here we are, Clarence.
Oh, good. It's very nice of you to ask me back to your flat, you know, Joyce. After all, we only met this evening.
I like you, Clarence. Shall we go in, then?
Oh, my, what an unusual room. Completely empty except for this very thick carpet.
We're on the bed.
Oh. Well, go on, then, Joyce, go on.
Right?
No, not that, Joyce. No, you said you'd show me your collection of antiques and padlocks.
Oh, just a minute. I'll get them out. There. How about them?
Oh, very nice. But when are you going to show me your chains and padlocks?
All right. Then they're here under the pillow.
Oh, yes. Oh, what a wonderful collection. This one is a fine example.
Oh, come on, Clarence. Quit stalling.
Stalling, Joyce?
Yeah, you know why you're here, don't you?
Yes, I do. It's because you chained my left leg to the bedpost. You didn't have to do that, you know, Joyce. I'll willingly stay to look at your collection of shackles, especially the one hanging from that hook on the ceiling. The one you just clapped round my right leg. Joyce, why are you undressing me?
Because, Clarence, you're about to taste the delights of what most people consider to be evil.
You mean you're going to give me what in his red barrel?
Bondage, Clarence. I have this thing about Mormons, you see.
I did have my suspicions when I spotted that inflatable rubber Donny Osmond under the pillow.
My luscious latter-day saint, my magnificent Mormon, take me.
Oh, no, please, Joyce. No, you've got it wrong, Joyce.
I know, it's nice, though, isn't it?
No, I mean, I'm not a Mormon. I'm not a Mormon.
What?
I'm a Quaker.
A Quaker?
Yes.
Oh, well, same difference. I mean, they like their oats as well, don't they?
No.
1978 was a very eventful year all round, wasn't it? It was the year when Jeremy Thorpe was charged over the Norman Scott affair, and all the other Liberals grew beards and started talking in very deep voices, you know. It was the year that made scientific history, when the world's first test tube baby was born in Oldham. Little Louise Brown. The parents said if it had been a boy, they'd have called it Pyrex. But then... And of course, Bob will love that one, I tell you, honestly, that'll be it. And of course, the regular broadcasting of Parliament began in 1978. This was how the first one sounded. Oh, well, sorry about that, but that's the way with live shows. There seems to be the wrong recording. We'll try the Parliament recording again, please. That's better. Got it right, then. Well, it was during that parliamentary session that Enoch Powell said if Prince Charles married a Catholic, it would be the end of the monarchy, as he had absolutely no sense of rhythm. 3 degrees clapping away in the back row there, lovely. Now, British British Steel forecast a £450 million loss, while at the same time the Post Office announced a £370 million profit. So a compromise was reached. Stainless steel stamps. You can tell I haven't been on the juice, can't you? There we are. And it's at this juncture where, on behalf of scriptwriters the world over, I'd like to thank British Leyland for the endless stream of comedy material that rolled off the assembly lines. Yes, exactly. And if I may, I'd like to offer my own little tribute in the form of a song. Some laugh at British prices and some at British sport, at British petrol crisis and funnies of that sort. But of all my favourite laughing stocks, the one that makes me choke with a ha 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 is the British Leyland joke.
Sir Michael said, Red Robbo, I'm giving you the sack. You're such a commie yobbo, I'll never take you back. Red Robbie called his cohorts out and smirked a righteous smirk. So White he did not notice they'd all gone back to work.
The latest proposition is just derisory,
Considering the condition is productivity.
Sir Michael wants a fair day's work to earn a fair day's pay.
with a ha 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 ha. That's the best I've heard all day. Well, still in 1978, oil pollution was getting so bad that seagulls were coming in 3 varieties. BP, SO and Shell. Then, of course, there was the story of the Bingham Report on sanctions busting. Now, Lord Thompson claimed...
Look, may I state here and now that I knew nothing of sanctions busting. I don't recall Lord Thompson informing me about it, and I certainly don't remember concealing the relevant documents in that shed behind number 10.
No one's suggesting that you did, Sir Harold.
And no one better had, Sunbeam, otherwise there'll be the inevitable consequences, understood?
You mean a libel suit?
No, I mean I'll have to go and burn that bloody shed down.
Which lover of fine music could ever forget this?
There was I, waiting at the church, waiting at the church, waiting at the church.
Indeed, Jim Callaghan auditioning for Panto. Or to put it another way, getting ready for the election. But why didn't Jim go to the country in October?
Well, I could have called the election for October, but I thought, no, too easy, too easy.
And come next May it was.
Yes, poor old Jim's popularity had dropped so low, he was now getting obscene phone calls from the Samaritans. A little goodie poked in there, folks, always worth it. In 1978 was the year when the government introduced their new health policy. Don't be ill, it's not good for you. Waiting lists for admission to hospital grew longer.
All right, my man, what's wrong with you? Come on, I haven't time.
I've got an ingrowing toenail. I've been waiting 3 years.
Is that all? Let's have a look at it then. Give me your feet. What's this? What's this? I can't see an ingrowing toenail.
It's here. It's growing out my throat.
And in 1978, in show business, it was bad news for Johnny Rotten, who got the sack from the Sex Pistols just because his spots cleared up. But in 1979, things were so bad in Britain, even the tide stayed out. But things were to get better because the people knew that a general election was just around the corner. As you know, a vote for the Tories meant a change in fortune for those who already had a fortune. Yeah, thank you very much. The one red in the back there, jolly good. Andy, thank you. And remember John Bindon was acquitted after months of worry and harassment? He came out of court and said he was looking forward to raising a few glasses. I didn't understand that one myself, but... Next month's copy of Mayfair will make all clear. And the Thorpe trial ended with acquittals all round. And as a permanent reminder of his experience, Jeremy Thorpe framed the skin of his teeth. And do you remember this year? How about this year? The BBC celebrated 25 years of weather forecasting. And they say they'll keep on until they get it right. And it was around that time when the big question mark arose over Tony Blackburn's job. How the hell did he get it in the first place? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, DLT. The election, though, that came in early May. And Mrs. Thatcher became Britain's first woman Prime Minister with a promise to take us all forward into the 19th century. But give the lady her due. She promised to do something about the rate of inflation, and within weeks she did. She doubled it. Yes, 1979 was undoubtedly the year of big stories and big names. Names like the Shah, the Ayatollah, the Pope, Brian Clough, and Herbert Atkinson. Oh, yeah, Herbert Atkinson. Remember him? He was the 700th man in the Anthony Blount Affair. Yes, the Blount Affair, the story that sent members of our MI5 rushing to the Soviet embassy to beg for political asylum. But Blount came out of hiding to give his confession to the Times, which proved not only he was a spy, but he was a snob as well. It makes you think, though, doesn't it? It makes you think, how many more Blounts there are, eh? God only knows.
I know, comrade, but I'm not telling you.
And finally, we come to this week, eh? A week in which we've all been celebrating Christmas. Yes, Christmas, the Jewish feast of turnover. And Boxing Day, the Gentile feast of leftover. There we But things soon get back to normal. You can tell that just by looking at today's papers, eh? Look at this lot. For instance, I see here that the steel industry is poised for a complete shutdown, which should save the country a few £100 million and still not affect production. And what about these frightening headlines, eh? Carter threatens Russia. Yes, he says if they don't get out of Afghanistan, his retaliation will put the Russian government in a highly dangerous and impossible situation. He's going to send them the Shah. Or send them the Shah, if you like. Meanwhile, I read that Mrs. Thatcher is threatening the OPEC countries over their latest oil increases. She says if they don't pack it in, she's going to invade Knightsbridge. They're all there, mate, and they in Knightsbridge, eh? What, not half. I went there last week. They make me leave my shoes in Fulham. You know? And looking on the inside pages, I see that they include the usual reports, like the one that says all bachelors are miserable. Eh? Well, fast cars, freedom, lots of money, different bird every night. Make anyone miserable, wouldn't it? Why I let the wife write my stuff, I'll never know. Then there's this headmaster who says we should encourage kids to study old comics. Did you see that? That's right, yeah. Next they're introducing O-levels in Tommy Trinder. PhDs in advanced Bob Monkhouse, if that's possible. Then there's news for clock watchers, because I see the Royal Observatory have made this year exactly 1 second longer. I thought it was dragging, didn't you? Oh, perhaps one of the silliest stories concerned this bank manager who moonlights as a vicar. Did you read that, eh? I ask you.
My son, there comes a time when you must pay for your sins.
American Express?
That'll do nicely.
One of my favourite stories today is about the milkman who delivered a baby to a mum in Birmingham. She was so annoyed she ordered a pint of Gold Top and a raspberry yoghurt. She was nice. And sad news, folks, I read that Reggie Bosanquet won't be appearing at the BBC's Hogmanay party. I know. Well, he's found out it's a bring-your-own-drinks affair. And someone told him the tanker drivers were on strike. Well, that was the 70s, eh? And if the 80s are anything like the 70s... Oh, God, it doesn't bear thinking about, does it, really? Let's look ahead and not forget that 1980 is here. So take a cup of kindness yet, for it may be all we fear. Another year.
A new decade.
You're overworked and underpaid.
But stop your cursing, things may get worse in the 1980s.
There's Sonny Jim.
There's Maggie J.
He's looking nervous.
She looks at sea.
Yes, there's no knowing
How things will go in
the 1980s.
Picture the house in session.
think what a year can bring. Yes, that's called acute depression. Hey, Daddy Harold, you grab a line here, baby, and sing.
I will indeed. Well, let's be matey. I don't deny it's 1980, and I won't try. Like I told Mary, they're necessary, the 1980s.
Well, hello, Jim.
It's David Steele.
It's Hogmanay time.
I know the feel.
I'll get my folk in.
And put the smoke in, the 1980s.
Think of 10 years' enjoyment. Maybe we'll hit the heights. So will our unemployment. Surely there's some delight.
Olympic Games!
Yes, 2 or more.
George Orwell's claims for 84.
But keep on trucking,
The best of luck in the 1980s.
That was the News Huddlines Look at the 70s, starring Roy Hudd with Janet Brown, Chris Emmett and the Nick Rowley Quintet. The script was written by Laurie Rowley, Andy Hamilton and Terry Ravenscroft, Peter Hickey, John Walker, Jeremy Brown and Richard Quick, with additional lines by Gerald Marlowe and David Kine.
All of whom have had their chestnuts roasted by our producer,
Jonathan James Moore.
And there we leave them celebrating at the Paris studio, and let's hope we'll still be able to laugh in the end of the 1980s. Roy Hudd, by the way, is now appearing in Dick Whittington at the New Theatre in Cardiff. 11 o'clock the time now, and at the Radio 2 News Desk, Chris Aldred.
The United Nations Secretary-General, Dr. Waldheim, is flying to Iran tomorrow to try to negotiate the release of the American hostages. But it looks as if he'll get a cold reception when he gets there. Although Iran's foreign minister says Dr. Waldheim will be able to gather information, it seems that Ayatollah Khomeini won't be seeing the Secretary-General.